tie the game up 2-2. Some drives out for Robbie Ryan. Her three right on the money. This is Taya Hansen for three. Other side of the rim with a pretty reverse. Wow. 5 seconds to go. Find Hawk. Hawk spins. It rolls on. And Arizona State wins it. Edwards pulls off. And buries the block. Daniels takes the shot for Kirby.
Welcome into Pitchfork Lunch. I am Michael Karpman. You can find me at Diablo00 on X, the artist formerly known as Twitter. You love it, you know it, and yes, I am rolling here today. And happy Thirsty Thursday. Again, you can check the show out on X, on my IG live at michael.cartino.5. Also, the YouTube channel. If you missed any of these shows, which you've missed a ton of great interviews, as you Pitchfork Lunchers know. And we'll have another one today with Chris Karpman, who will be joining me at 12:30. He's the publisher, as you know, of Sun Devil Source for 24/7 Sports. And we'll be talking not just the matchup against Utah tonight that ASU men's hoops has, but the matchup, like I said, not just the matchup tonight against Utah, which is at 9 p.m. So a little bit of a late tip-off locally. So like I said, if you can get out there, I know if you got youngsters, and if they're still not on winter break, probably tough game to get out to, I know. But the students will be out there, the ones that I know that are at least back in town. The 942 crew will be rocking it at Desert Financial Arena, 9 p.m. But we'll talk about Utah. We'll also talk about some stuff that came up yesterday, and I'll actually play some of the presser for you. Talk to Frankie Collins and to Coach Bobby Hurley after their practice yesterday in getting ready for this weekend's games against the Mountain Schools. Like I said, Utah tonight, Colorado on Saturday. Two very good teams, and two teams that are also 2-0 in Pac-12 play, as ASU went to the Bay Area needing at least a split. I talked about it with the way, and I mean, it was touched on quite a bit amongst quite a few of us. But you couldn't go in there and get swept. A sweep, you would have, if you would have got swept, would have been, I mean, detrimental. That would have been five in a row. And that would have been very, very tough to overcome. A split, you would have been like, okay, you know what? Like, obviously you're on the road. That's good. Big fan of it. But to sweep the Bay Area series, that is just, again, and their net ranking, and I'll talk to Chris about that, because I get non-conference play if you beat a team and who somebody else played that was close to you, or, in the net ranking, if they obviously were a higher ranked team. But once you get to conference play, like when you're playing who's in front of you, like it's just, I'm not saying it should all be left to computers and no emotion. I'm not saying an eye test, I say this with football too. I'm not saying an eye test shouldn't be part of it, but when you don't win, like, that's the first thing. That's the most important thing. Yes, when you play certain schools and football, basketball, same thing in basketball. I mean, football, look, is a depth thing. You have a much huger roster. I mean, you have 85 scholarship players, and you what can um, I think you can travel with like 63 or 65, something like that. I'll have to ask Chris about that one too. I always screw up that number because I know they've changed it. I mean, it hasn't it's not like a ton, it's not been a massive discrepancy, but I think it's like you can travel with football. I think you can travel with 62 or 65, something like that. Um, so it's, but in basketball, obviously, you have 13 players on the bench. So, but I mean, talent wise, schools that might not have and still could go to depth. I mean, what you have players you have coming off your bench, but ASU swept that series and their net ranking went down. Okay. I forgot that winning was the whole point of it. So, and yes, who they played in conference, and I talked about Cal's and Stanford's records. But nonetheless, we'll dive into this with Chris Karpman. He's coming up at 12:30, so do not go far. I always love talking to him. Appreciative when he gives his time because, again, he's been covering the Sun Devils for very, very a few minutes, as I like to say. We've been covering it for a few minutes. But yeah, the publisher of Sun Devil Source for 24/7 Sports will join us. So we'll talk men's hoops. Also, you're going to hear from Bobby Hurley yesterday. And you're going to hear from Bobby Hurley yesterday from what he talked about. And yeah, it's just like I said, it's absolutely awesome because he talks about it. And there's, but getting those 2 wins, you can see the collective kind of breath. And, Christmas break did it well. Now, you jump into it with Cal and Stanford. Again, good teams, not to the level of what Utah and Colorado Utah and Colorado are right now. So it's um so yeah, I mean what Utah and Colorado are right now. So I yeah, I, I look at it like this: like you need to get wins, you need to build confidence. They're still undefeated at home. This is a team that was 5-0 at home in non-conference. The ups and downs of it, still found a way to win. Had that nail biter. What was it against San Francisco, where Frankie Collins again gets the ball, goes end to end, and has a tough shot, but lays it up and in. So I look at it as um to build confidence. Good. The winter break did them well, and I'll get into that with Chris as well too. So but yeah, we'll hear from Bobby Hurley, we'll hear from Frankie Collins as well. So from yesterday, and then Chris will jump on at 12:30. The women tomorrow, they'll be taking on Utah. So I'll talk more about that tomorrow. Again, not forgetting women's hoops. And I'm going to reach out, see if, yeah, we'll go from there. But women's hoops, they're taking on Utah tomorrow, but the men have Utah tonight at 9 p.m. So for the SIDs working the game, working both, they might just have a slumber party at DFA. No, I'm just kidding. Also, hockey tomorrow, Harvard. They take on Harvard at 7 p.m. at Mullet Arena. So, again, you have your awesome options of staying, having a fun extended weekend in Tempe today, tomorrow, Friday, Saturday, today, which is Thursday, tomorrow, Friday, and then Saturday and Sunday as well. It is all going down. So yeah, that is what is going on. But I'm going to take a quick break. When we get back, I'm going to play the sound from Coach Hurley and from Frankie Collins yesterday. and talking about going forward, what break did, what those 2 wins did, and a few more stuff. A little bit, team's a little bit getting a little bit healthier too. Sean Phillips Jr.'s on a minutes restriction. That is good, but we'll get to all that. So I will step aside, and we'll have more coming up here on Pitchfork Lunch. All right, we are back here on Pitchfork Lunch. I am Michael Caratanito at Diablo00 on X, artist formerly known as Twitter. And you can see the show on IG Live. Go to my YouTube channel, though. Subscribe to my YouTube channel. Again, all those shows are there. You can check them out. Any interviews you've missed a ton of good ones. Coaches, players, everything. It's at M as in Michael, V as in Victory, C as in Cat 005 at MVC 005 on YouTube. And again, subscribe. You can binge watch the shows and enjoy them, share them, all that good stuff. So again, going all around Sun Devil country. So Forks Up, go all around there. And check out all the little shows. But I'm going to get into it. Yesterday, again, Bobby Hurley and Frankie Collins did talk. And we'll start with Frankie Collins. Again, it's talking about coming off break, getting those 2 wins. And again, just how this team adjusted. But yeah, again, so good to see the point guard, obviously, what the work he's put in, the fact that excuse me, had a sneeze, pardon me. The fact that he came back and all that, and what it meant to him to come back. So there we go. So yeah, we'll hear from Sun Devil point guard Frankie Collins.
Frank, what was that like going through the roller coaster of that weekend?
It was fun actually, just because the excitement of it and the ending. The ending is always like the best part for us right now because we always tend to fight throughout the game. So it was fun mostly because we got the 2 road wins, so that was great.
What is it about this team that when you feel a sense of urgency, that's what catapults you guys forward?
I think it's just our will to win. I think once it gets to like a certain point in the game, we just tend to wake up. Out of nowhere, and and it's mostly because of our press that we have. So we tend to get a lot of steals and get a lot of transition and electrifying plays out of it. So that helps us gain momentum.
So Frankie, when you had that first team meeting when you came back from Christmas break, you know, after a 3-game losing streak, what was the message that the coaches were trying to convey to you?
It was more so just to come back after break with a new mindset to come together, and a new mindset to have to be committed to what we're trying to do. So I think guys that came back with that mindset, and we had 2 road wins, and in the Pac-12 it's hard to get a road sweep. So for us to go do that showed that we came back with the right mindset.
Was it a situation where like the coaches didn't have to tell you how urgent the situation is? The players already knew that.
Yeah. I think the players already kind of knew like what we were getting ourselves into, and like what was needed to be done for us to go out there and get those 2 wins.
And Frankie, to piggyback off that, I know after Northwestern, obviously you're a little frustrated, but you said the team's got to focus on obviously the mental toughness. When you get punched in the mouth, you guys have counter-punched before, but yeah, it's 2 games, but I mean, did you see improvement in that?
Yeah, you can definitely see improvement, because I mean, Stanford kind of punched us in the mouth early and throughout the whole game they led, and also Cal. So for us to bounce back after and staying together and maintaining those punches and being able to counter punch really showed that we're making improvements in that area.
You put a lot of work into your shot, obviously, in the offseason. How do you feel about just seeing that kind of pay dividends now?
It's great. I'm glad the shot's finally starting to fall. I mean, I've been working on it for years now, so just to see that the work's working is a confidence booster for sure.
Is there anything different that you did this offseason or that you focused on that maybe you think had an impact?
No, not really. I think I just stayed consistent to what I've been doing. So, like, I mean, sometimes when you do things, it won't always pay off right away. So sometimes you gotta wait the long run and, you know, just continue to work at it and be consistent at it, and it'll show out there on the floor.
I know you previously talked about the rigorous diet that you had in the off season. Do you think that kind of goes hand in hand with the improved jump shooting?
Yes, because fatigue plays a part into jump shots as well. So, like, for me to be in the shape that I am right now, being able to play 35 minutes a night, just with the same energy and the same, you know, mindset of playing hard the whole entire 35 minutes has a lot to do with my diet, and that helps improve jump shots late down the stretch. You know, when you're tired or you're a little fatigued, or you got to be in shape to maintain and make those shots.
If you guys are able to win on Thursday, it would be Bobby's 150th win here at ASU as head coach at ASU. What would that mean to get that milestone?
That'll mean a lot. It'll be great also because Utah is a good team, a great program, and they're one of the top teams in the country right now. So I think being able to get that win for Coach Hurley will be good for us and good for him as well.
Other than just consistency, like where do you feel like this team has the most opportunity to improve like in the coming weeks?
I would just say, like you said, obviously consistency, but I would just say, you know, with us making our open shots, I think we get a lot of open opportunities and we don't really convert on it. So I think maybe it'll be one game where we just have a game where we're just making a lot of shots, and hopefully that'll help us make the shots moving forward. Because we get a lot of easy opportunities, a lot of open shots, and we just haven't been converting on it.
And how's it been, obviously, I mean, being the point where we're working Adam into the offense, I mean, since he's been able to play?
Say it again, sorry.
Working Adam into the offense.
Oh, yeah. It's not hard at all. Adam's a great basketball player. He understands the game, so he makes reads, and shots to start falling for him. I mean, he had the first game where he made a lot of shots, and since then it kind of slowed down, but it'll definitely pick back up. I don't think we're really too worried about Adam.
It looks like Kamar really settled into that really significant player off the bench. What have you seen from him the last couple of weeks?
Just confidence. His confidence has been boosted, and I think he's not hesitating on his shots, and he's just getting right into his shots and picking his spots. So we need him to make shots for us, and he's been doing that. So we know that he'll continue to do that.
This is a little old, but when Coach had that post-game presser where he was talking about, we've got to decide as a team if we're going to take punches or we're going to start throwing. You know, are we going to stand up and fight? The whole time he was saying that, even though he didn't drop a loud hammer, you were sitting there nodding the whole time. It's not very often a coach drops the hammer a little bit and has another player agreeing with him the whole time. Did you help push that message in the last couple of weeks of standing up and fighting?
Yeah, because like I said, I'm always have coaches back. I'm gonna have my teammates back as well. But sometimes we gotta hold ourselves accountable. Like we get punched in the mouth a lot, but I think there's like we can't always just be out there just getting punched and then trying to wake up the last 6 minutes of the game. Sometimes it ain't gonna work. I mean, it's worked a lot of times, but I mean most of the time it's not gonna work. So I just think we gotta start coming out stronger and taking control of the game throughout the whole game.
And you feel good this week?
Yeah,
that in practice?
Yeah, definitely.
Frankie, kind of 0 assists as a team in that first half against Cal. It's got to improve all moving wise.
I think, like I said, it has a lot to do with us making open shots. I think once we start making our open shots and converting easy layups and easy runners and things like that, I think that'll help us get our assists up. I don't think it was lack of ball movement. I think we kind of played together. We just really struggled putting the ball in the hoop. But I think once we start making our open shots, we'll be fine.
Thanks, Frankie.
And there is Frankie Collins, and you heard him. I mean, the break, he said, I mean, guys came back in, and I mean, that was Hoder Reno that asked him, if coaches were, really didn't have to say too much. And yeah, that's one of those things where I wouldn't think they would, but hitting the open shots. I've talked about that ad nauseum. A lot of people have talked about that. You're getting opportunities, and look, offensively, it's working out because they are getting open shots. Those got to start falling like at a higher clip, and he states that, and they know that. Jemiah Neal, coach talks about that, how he didn't have the best of offensive games at Stanford, but had a block, had a steal late, or the block late that helped wrap up the game against Stanford. So, yeah, I mean, look, what Jemiah Neal said, and that's why I asked him about Adam Miller, too, because of the decision that came down. So these guys that were on waivers can now play. The multiple transfer rule. So that's going to be interesting. I'll talk about that with Chris. But, yes, let's get to Coach Hurley. And, again, we'll get to a little bit of Coach Hurley, and then Chris is going to jump in. But, yes, without further ado, here is Sun Devil head coach Bobby Hurley.
So, Bobby, can you describe what that first team meeting was when you came back from Christmas break, trying to break a 3-game losing streak? Is it a situation where there's not much needs to be said, or really there's still a message you want to drive that really led to the results last weekend?
Well, I mean, you kind of at a turning point where you got to make a decision. Are you going to start consistently playing together, playing as a team, sharing the ball, appreciating your teammates, being happy for your teammates when something good happens. There's a lot of things that go into becoming a team, and we showed flashes of it at different times of different games when we were desperate in the non-conference, but top to bottom, it wasn't what we were hoping for. It hasn't come together in that regard. It didn't. So we talked a lot. I mean, it wasn't a ton of basketball-related adjustments that were made. It was more, just trying to get everybody to get on the same page about competing and playing for each other and playing the right way. And I thought we did that for Stanford, and for the most part, even though we got down in those games. I mean, Stanford is playing well right now, based on certainly their game with Arizona. So I thought we played pretty well. We shot 47% in that game, and played well defensively, very active late in the game, just with the steals and just finishing our opponent, and just closing that game out was pretty special. And then we didn't play well at all at Cal, but I think we stayed together, we stayed in the fight, and we found a way to win.
In your experience, is playing together, accountability, all of those things you just mentioned, is that player driven? I mean, everything's your responsibility, but is that really more about the players, or is that something you can do to get them to do?
Yeah, I mean, we're trying, and everybody has their own goals and things they want to do individually in the sport. And so, when those thoughts collide with what's best for the team, that's where there's work to be done always. But I think we have recruited guys that are really good guys off the court, and have good character, and have a drive and a will to win, and that's evidenced in multiple times where we've been at a really bad deficit and been able to scramble and figure out a way to win. So I think it's just a matter of getting these guys to sacrifice a little more of their own thoughts and kind of just gravitate more to a team concept.
What have you thought about the 4-guard lineups, how that's fared, and obviously there's trade-offs that you're making as part of that?
Yeah, I mean, some of it is out of necessity, just due to Sean's minute restriction right now, and Zane's injury, and we've had to figure out a way to play a little bit different. But I think when we went to that lineup versus Cal, it opened some doors for us on the offensive end. The spacing was a little bit better. The floor opened up for Frankie more, and with that lineup for that stretch, the ball was going in the basket. And I've had some smaller lineups in the past that have been very successful at times, but they've been with very small guards. Whereas this lineup, even though it is 5 guards, I mean, there's Frankie is a physical, athletic 6'2" point guard, and Adam is physical, and Jose. So I think for not long term, but in small doses, we could get away with it more and still not totally lose our identity on defense, because we just we can't rebound or we can't challenge shots the way we're capable of.
And that was Coach Hurley. So yes, talking a little bit about yesterday in defense. I touched on it yesterday. Yes, Coach has said it a million times. The offense is going great. They can't suffer on the defensive end of the court. We're going to take a quick break. When we get back, though, yes, the legend, the man, the myth, the legend, the star, Chris Karpman is going to join me, the publisher of Sun Devil Source for 24/7 Sports. Quick break, and we'll be back with Chris right after this here on Pitchfork Lunch. All right, back here on Pitchfork Lunch. I am Michael Caratino at Diablo00 on X, the artist formerly known as Twitter. And like I said before the break and from the top of the show, we are going to talk to Chris Karpman, the publisher of Sun Devil Source for 24/7 Sports, a man who hopefully never enters the transfer portal, because now we know he can enter it multiple times and he will be well desired. Chris, thanks for jumping on, my friend. Appreciate it.
No problem, man. How are you? Happy New Year.
Yes. Oh, yes. Happy New Year's. A little slow on New Year's Day. I was gonna say every minute I get further from getting used to maybe staying up later on New Year's and maybe enjoying the festivities a little too much. The next day becomes a little bit tougher. Just gonna be honest, Chris. Just gonna be honest.
We're not really getting any younger, are we?
Touche. It's the marathon, not the sprint part, that we have to remember, right? But speaking of that, look, I mean, we talk about hoops, and I know Coach and team very. I mean, you said it when we talked at the Jerry Colangelo Hall of Fame series. I mean, that first half against Northwestern, and most of that game was just flat out ugly. I mean, there's really no other way to describe it. Northwestern did have something to do with that, but defensively at times they lacked effort, which is we're not used to seeing in Bobby Hurley's tenure. But coming back against Cal, beating Stanford, going 2-0 to start. I mean, if you want to talk Jekyll and Hyde, what were your just overall thoughts when you saw them get back on the court?
Can't really be too surprised by anything that you see. Bobby Hurley's teams, we've seen it over the years for a long time now. They tend to play their best when their backs are against the wall, or when they feel an extra sense of motivation or something. That's probably the thing that frustrates fans, is that the consistency doesn't match what the better performances would seem to indicate about some of the teams. and don't really know exactly why that is, other than just they're young, and sometimes that's the way that the nature of college basketball kind of tends to be as well. I feel like this team has 10 new players, and then you had on top of that the Adam Miller situation, the injuries, Sean Phillips, Zane Meeks, and sort of figuring out their identity and who they were trying to be and how took some time to get together. And now we're starting to see pretty clearly they understand Jose Perez was a late addition, and he hadn't practiced a lot with the team before the season started. You're seeing what he does. You're getting a better sense of what Frankie Collins's role really should be within this team, which is being that alpha leader, shooting the ball a lot better. And Phillips, now you can maybe ramp up his minutes, and that lessens the burden on in some other ways that you have on Alonzo Gaffney and other players, Kamari Lands, perhaps. And we're probably getting the clearest sense yet of what this team probably will end up being for the next couple months.
Which, yeah, for Frankie Collins, I mean, and you've talked about it. A lot of people, coaches mentioned it ad nauseum. I know, like, the open shots have to start falling. The good news about your offense, Chris, as we know in hoops, is you're getting a lot of open looks. It's working, but you're not hitting. I mean, I know there's obviously, no magic wand to wave. They have to put the work in. Those shots have to go down. But, I mean, what else from a coaching standpoint, what else can coach do? Because it seems like, you're saying from a fan standpoint, if you're just watching as a fan, like, all right, not every single shot is crazy contested. Why are they not hitting open shots? To you, is it maybe bringing different guys off the bench, maybe giving some guys a few more minutes to give this team a spark? I mean, if I'm a coach, I know that's the frustrating part, but I mean, what more can he do?
Well, this is a multifaceted thing that you're talking about. First of all, it starts with identifying and recruiting the right guys who are going to be shot makers and play well within the structure of what you're doing offensively. The second thing is calling the right sets of plays. Hurley wants to be more of a free-form, open court coach, but then he's had to go to more sets with this particular team. Then it is the caliber of the offense that you're running and the ability to execute that at a high level. And then it comes down to taking the right shots within the offense and then making the shots that you get. The Northwestern game, really good example. ASU, I think, was 1 of 13 on 2-point shots that weren't at the basket. And that's the frustrating thing for Hurley or any coach, is if you're getting shots that you think that you should be making and you're not nearly close to the rate that you expect, that's going to lead to a lot of frustration. Problem that happened, I think, earlier at times this season, Michael, is when that was the case, that they were missing shots, they didn't continue to play hard and physically and rebound and defend. And then one of the things I pointed out about Jemiah Neal's performance in particular against Stanford was he shot the ball poorly, which he hasn't really shot the ball that well this season, but he had the game-winning block that sealed it. And then he also, before that, had a steal. He had some very good defensive possessions. He led the team in rebounding. And so those are, to me, the examples of what you need to become a more stable, functioning team. Is you can't have those lulls defensively and on the glass when your shot's not falling. And you also can't take bad shots to press when your shot's not falling. You have to be smart. And so I think that's what coaches are going to have to continue to just drill into these guys as they move forward.
With Jemiah Neal, I want to expand on that with you too, because, and I'm not calling, I said this yesterday on the show, and I had to remind people, I'm not calling him James Harden. I'm not calling him, Manu Ginobili. And I say that to you as those are guys in the pros that, when Harden started his career, he was coming off the bench at OKC. Yes, we see what he became. He was obviously good enough to be a starter. But Manu Ginobili was starting, and Pop sent him, he's like, you need to be that sixth man. I need that spark. For the second, Jemiah Neal's come off the bench before. I mean, for shooting wise, because again, the defense, you're right. The block, like Coach said earlier to us, I mean, that these guards are going to have to rebound we know how they're short in the front court. And Jemiah Neal and Frankie Collins took that to heart. They're like not releasing. They're like, hey, we got to go back. if those guys are going to box out, we got to get the board because we know we're undersized. But would it be something to you to think that maybe Jemiah Neal maybe coming off the bench, not so much that coach would be as a shot at his confidence that he's not starting, but coming off the bench and maybe inserting Kamari Lands into the starting lineup might make a difference for Jemiah?
Perhaps. I don't think significantly. I don't really expect that. Kamari Lands to me is a 3-and-D guy if he's operating at a high level. I just look at Jemiah Neal. He had such success last season, very late to end the year. And then you put expectations on yourself. You go to Pac-12 Media Day. It's you and Frankie Collins. This is our team. And you know that you're capable of breaking down guys off the dribble and scoring. I'm a Laker fan. Like, I grew up in Los Angeles. So when Brandon Ingram was a Laker, you saw he oozed so much potential being able to score off the dribble, but yet he wasn't as efficient early on as he later became with the Pelicans, right? And so I'd look at what Neal is kind of doing is, okay, he was the third Cambridge, quote unquote. The other Cambridges are gone. I'm going to step into this void. And then I think that he put too much pressure on himself, perhaps, or maybe was pressing, and he took a lot of shots and kind of over dribbled to some degree when they were sort of trying to figure out what they were going to be from an identity standpoint earlier on in the season. I think that more recently, a lot of what he's been doing is more within the flow, and whether that's coming off the bench or starting, I don't think that particularly matters. His minutes are going to be pretty comparable regardless. And ASU's playing a lot of these 4-guard lineups now, which I think will continue as long as Zane Meeks is out of the lineup. And, perhaps we'll see more as Phillips ramps up. Maybe we'll see more of Phillips and Gaffney on the court in some combination, which then allows you to not have to lean so heavily on some of your perimeter players getting those extensive minutes.
Well, that's a great transition to say, because now we're talking Utah tomorrow night. It's of course, a wonderful late tip-off in the desert, 9 p.m. As they take on Utah. Utah, okay, talking about the front court, Chris, I mean, they have size. They have big guys that, yes, can handle the ball, but I mean, they have size. They are going to definitely – the rebounding is going to be a very team effort for ASU. But when you look at Utah, I know Coach mentioned it yesterday too, that, this core did stick together. But outside of that length, I mean, the challenges that Utah brings for fans headed to the game that Utah brings against ASU.
Well, you mentioned it. They're, I think, second or third longest team, tallest team in the country by Ken Palm. Carlson's one of the best 7-footers for sure in the country, but he's not just a plodding interior guy. He moves very well. He's a good 3-point shooter for his size, so that allows you to open the court up. This is a team that plays extremely efficiently at the offensive end of the floor. 4 starters back. They got extremely good guard play, one of the best 3-point shooters in the conference, if not in the country, one of the best ball distributing point guards in the country. They make a very high percentage of their shots from all levels, all 3 levels of the court. And you can't really hone in too much on any one particular thing, which all of that together makes it really a challenge. Now, if there is something that's positive for ASU, Utah's not really a great offensive rebounding team, not really a great rebounding team overall, despite being as tall as it is, and also not great at the free throw line. It doesn't get to the free throw line a ton. So you put those things together, and there is a formula for ASU to be able to be successful. But what it really comes down to is forcing contested shots that are not at the basket, and then also not allowing second chance opportunities, because ASU is not a very good rebounding team and also doesn't have enough second chance opportunities via offensive rebounds. So but its challenges, I think, more so have been on the offensive end overall, even though Utah will test you quite significantly when you're on defense as well.
And with Sean Phillips talking about being on the minutes restriction, Chris, I mean, is it something you think we see maybe a lot of his minutes early and then the rest of them late, just to kind of combat that?
Well, yeah, I'm sure they're going to ramp him up to some degree. He played 11 minutes and then 12 minutes the last 2 games. I wouldn't be surprised if he plays 20 minutes or maybe even more than that. So yeah, I mean, he'll probably be on the floor those first 4 or 5 minutes, and then the last 4 or 5 minutes, and then maybe in between then, in the middle 30-ish minutes, you might get him on the floor for no more than half of that, right? But starting the second half as well. So I feel like what you need from him, he doesn't have great strength. And then his foot issue was kind of a little bit of an issue. You need him to be as much of a physical presence as you possibly can to prevent Carlson from getting to where he wants on the floor with his spots. If you can prevent him from getting to where he wants, it makes it a little bit tougher for them operationally within their offense. And then you need Utah doesn't get a lot of shots blocked or altered, which is one of the factors. But if you can get Gaffney, who's a pretty good shot blocker, especially not when he's playing at center, sort of a help a blocker, and if you can get him and Phillips, maybe even a little bit of them together on the floor, you can have a little bit more of a presence in the paint, which then perhaps is a recipe for you to stay in this game and build some confidence.
Well, you just answered my next question too, because I was going to say, what does that do for Gaffney? But yes, the wing defense, it can push him out. And like you're saying, at least challenging shots, make it contested, make it tough. Okay, yesterday I want to shift gears because we obviously talked about, ASU's headed to the Big 12. The NIL and everything. What it means to players. And now if it's, and Coach answered it, I'm all, like I've told you from the beginning, I was all for the transfer portal. If I recruited you and I bolted as a coach, and obviously you came to play for me, and as I know I've said to you a million times, like people that have been recruited, yeah, the campus should be a fit. What you want to major in the program should be a fit. You're coming to play for me. If inevitably it's worked out, if I leave, you should be able to leave. If the NCAA wanted to instate a rule years ago saying, okay, fine, if that coach leaves, you can't just go jump ship with him, which I think is kind of lame, but that's fine. You can transfer right away. You won't have to sit out. But now multiple transfers with the NIL. It almost seems like from a organizational standpoint, not that NIL isn't important, because it is, but it's going backwards because it's like the Wild West. If I can transfer, after the first year and then after the second year, because, to me, it just looks like from people that are too overboard conspiracy theorists, Chris, that there's going to be a ton of tampering, like, oh, so-and-so is going to offer this much more money. Oh, I can get this next year. Okay, well, I want to win here, but I'm out. Like, what do you see it going to? And is there any way to not turn it into the crazy Wild West if this multiple transfer thing outside of just one transfer and then a grad transfer ends up holding up?
No, you can't put Humpty Dumpty back together again. No. Sorry to burst your bubble on that, man. But the reality is, if you were a proponent or a believer that kids should get, the student athletes should get NIL money, right? And they're also not employees, right? Then how can you prevent them from monetizing to the maximum degree that they possibly can via transfer? So the thing that happened, unfortunately, was years ago, the NCAA had the opportunity to cut in players into a lot of the TV revenue contracts and make sure that a portion of the overall pie, either at each school or through media rights, was going to players as a workaround to a lot of what's happening now in NIL. But once that was not done, and then players were given the opportunity to be compensated in NIL, and the universities are not employing them, then they were going to be able ultimately, I think, invariably, to be able to transfer an unlimited amount of times. One of the things that you and I talked about before today was that these players, they have a relatively small window of opportunity to have an economic windfall as a result of being athletes. They're done playing by the time that they're in their late 30s or much earlier in many cases, of course, right? So the reality now is that ASU lost Warren Washington and Devin Cambridge to Texas Tech because they were able to get more money on the open market than they were at ASU. And that became pretty much clear to them. And that was part of their consideration, of course. They're not going to be first-round draft picks, or maybe not even second-round draft picks. Right. And they're going to have 10, 15-year windows in which they can try to monetize. And those guys are making into the six figures. They're making more than most people are, of course, right? So the bottom line is that this is here to stay. And if you're a booster or a supporter of a football program or a basketball program, it matters a lot to you. The only way that you're going to see any sort of reliable success is if that program, that team has a robust NIL. Otherwise, it's not going to happen.
Right. So to expand on that from the recruiting standpoint, because I mean, look, and I'm not busting him. I mean, it was out there. I played it a lot on the show. His soundbite, Willie Bloomquist, you could just see was annoyed with not that players were transferring. He understands that. And again, coaches, even if they're not for it, Chris, publicly, they're going to be for it, because what are you going to recruit a player, say, no, you're not going to transfer. But now they have that avenue to do it. But just the frustration of, pardon me, another coach coming in or program coming in and tampering with that. So is the NCAA's only real kind of discipline basically of this going to be if they literally find out schools are talking to you, Chris Karpman, before like a period of time where they actually could, or you're there, that they're just going to hammer the schools with huge fines?
The bottom line really is that the players themselves don't have to talk to coaches or schools. Everybody had high school coaches. They got family members. They got other people who are allowed to have conversations with people that work for NIL entities. Right. And so there's always going to be an understanding of what might be available on the open market. This idea of punishing people for tampering, I just think that it's going to be unlikely, except for maybe like really extreme, obvious cases. Right. And so that's, this is just kind of where we're at. There's a lot of times what happens is by the time that some of these athletes are in the portal, they already know where they're going to be going. And then a couple, 2-3 days later, they announce their new home. And it's not like they entered the portal and then they go, okay, let me see who's going to recruit me now. Right.
Right.
You're because then you might not be welcome back to the school that you're leaving. They could say, yeah, we don't want you either. And then you don't get a better opportunity. And then you're kind of SOL on the whole thing. Right. So bottom line is, that was my first SOL. So I don't know if that was allowed on the pitch lunch.
Of course
but,
it is.
But yeah, but anyway, so this is just kind of where we're at now, man.
Yeah, no, and look, and like I've said from the beginning, I know a lot of like detractors, and I always go back to that, and we've talked about it before, but that funny line in the program where they're trying to get the backup quarterback reinstated, and James Conn says, yeah, when's the last time 80,000 people came out to a chemistry experiment? Like, I get that. And people that are like, on the education side saying, well, that's fine. If they want to make money and they're not employees, but they should have to pay for school then. Like, why is it, some kid that's, just going to school that's, maybe academically gifted and might have a partial scholarship, but they have to partially pay for school then because yes, they can go make millions. Let me ask you this though, because with basketball, with the multiple transfer, personally, I think I could see more. Do you think it would affect basketball more than football? Just because when we always talk about, a system, a player, is good with this coach and this system, how they do it. Do you think it would be just kind of more blown up in basketball than football?
Probably a little bit. And the main reason is actually because you only need a handful of basketball players to put a championship caliber team together.
Right.
So if you're missing one or two pieces to that, and a guy can transfer whatever, right? That creates a more of a demand, more of a market, which then creates more money opportunity for some of these players. So yeah, I think that you're going to see, we already have, but we're going to see a lot of players who play for 3 or 4 different colleges over a span of 4 or 5 years, right, because they're going on a year-to-year basis to the places where a combination of money and opportunity await them. And look, football, you probably need a $4 or $5 million a year roster just to even have a serious conversation about whether you can be a top 25 team now, unless, some magic happens. Basketball is a little bit different. You got teams like FAU right now that definitely don't have multiple millions of dollars on their roster. They might not even have $1 million. They might not even have $500,000 on their roster. So you can put together something that's very successful. It's not like Utah or Colorado are spending millions of dollars with their NIL support on those rosters,
right,
and they're still very good teams. So I don't want to say that, okay, there's no chance, but the problem really has more to do with maintaining a roster once you have had some amount of success. Like ASU was a tournament team, then schools were like, oh, hey, would be nice to have Warren Washington and Devin Cambridge and DJ Horn, and then nothing really at ASU was able to match, and then they were gone. Right. So it's, of course, ASU would have been probably a better team if it had Frankie Collins, Warren Washington, Jemiah Neal, Devin Cambridge, right? Plus you add Adam Miller and maybe you add Sean Phillips on top of that. Now you're a really good team. Now you're probably a top 25 team. The problem is that for that to happen, to go from NCAA tournament, top, not in the top 30 or 40, but the next tier to then pushing up higher, you're going to have more support to be able to accomplish that. And Bobby Hurley, you played the clip. He recognizes this now because he understands that the number one role is going to be fundraising and NIL, because that's how you have the best chance of maintaining your roster. It's not recruiting other players. It's keeping the ones that you have that are good.
You know why I'm smiling and laughing, Chris? Because when you said, what I thought of? All those people that ripped and, certain coaches aren't going to go to it. And that's why now a lot of these mid-majors are going to do better in the tournament because these guys are playing for 4 or 5 years, before, the transfer portal and NIL, obviously. But John Calipari, man, find a bunch of great, like you said, you want to win a championship. If your goal is to get to the NBA, find a bunch of one and dones. Have a good day. Like 1 year, yeah, maybe they 3 or 4 guys make around, like you said, $500,000, maybe $1 million, and it's one and done. It's like, bye. Like John Calipari's laughing because if he had the vision, and I'm not saying he did, but I'm saying, Chris, if he had the vision to see that, like that's a great concept. And yeah, I know they won one title, but still get the one and dones that are talented. They're going to the NBA, and this doesn't have to become as much of a headache.
Well, it's interesting. There's a lot of different sort of dynamics at play here in college basketball. You now have a lot more players because they can make money, but they're not going to be first-round draft picks staying in college basketball for longer periods of time. Right. So you have a bunch of guys who are, how it was 10, 15 years ago. Almost nobody was in college basketball that was any good for more than like 2 years.
Right.
And now you have guys, because they can make as much money as they would overseas or playing in the G League, they're now hanging out in college for 3 or 4 or 5 years when you factor in the COVID stuff. That's a positive for the overall caliber of college basketball, I think. It is, of course, true that you can get a bunch of one and done guys that you're trying to put together something that's immediately successful. The thing, though, is that you need to be at a very elite program for that to even be possible. Right. Like Calipari, it's not like that Calipari just did that. It was a product of him over about a 20 to 30 year period, developing into where he had that thing going at Kentucky like that. Right. And so that's not, Duke can do that if it wants to, and, maybe 1 or 2 other programs, but for the most part, that's not happening. And really, even a lot of those guys now, as you know, they're going to pro opportunities out of high school that aren't the NBA while they have that 1 year that they have to hang out before they are draft eligible. And in fact, a lot of the top 10, top 15 guys, they're not even playing college basketball anymore because they're making even more money in some other venue. But we'll see what happens, because it's going to continue to evolve.
Right. And to me, and we brought up that great point yesterday when we were talking after the presser, is that why go overseas and make less if you can, stay here in college Or like you said, I mean, I know that for the G League they allowed it one, but you can stay in college and make like what you would your rookie year, even if you're not going to the NBA, and $2 million a year.
And potentially improve draft stock.
Yeah.
That's the thing. If you go pro, you're not getting drafted. There's no other draft. It's like you get the one draft and that's it. If you stay in college and you're thinking, oh, I can get better, maybe I move from being a second rounder to a first rounder,
Right.
or I move from not being drafted to being a guy who can get a two-way contract, right? Those things matter a lot. Like, and that's, if you're making comparable money, you'd rather stay in the States. Yep. And probably do that in most cases, even if it means, the headache of, having to take some classes or whatever.
Right. And okay, let me get you out here on this. We're going to shift. I didn't drop on you, but obviously the college football playoff, the championship game. And yes, I'm still bitter. The last year of the Pac-12, but they were in it the first year and they're in it the last year. Michigan, Washington, obviously people have talked about the contrast of styles. Oh, can, Washington run the ball? Is Johnson going to be able to play? Yes, we know Michael Penix Jr. gets rid of it. Can, like he says, drop those arrows in on the bullseye to those NFL receivers. But just your thoughts of the matchup coming up between Washington and Michigan.
Well, the biggest takeaway I had from the two semifinal games, which were great games, was that Texas didn't really find the right recipe for how to attack Washington. We saw when ASU played Washington and had the best performance defensively of any team in the last couple of years. It used very aggressive A-gap pressure to get rushers in the immediate viewing window of Penix to force him to get the ball out. And what they did to combination that was they played a lot of bump coverage on the perimeter at corner, where they had their defensive backs getting hands on the receivers to delay their routes early on. But what Texas did was it tried not so much to bring A-gap pressure, but it brought some of its pressure on the edge, but played more relaxed coverage. The routes weren't getting delayed, and Penix was able to do a very good job definitely moving around in the pocket when he wasn't feeling as threatened or stepping up to get by that extra second to get rid of the football. He's never going to get sacked. He doesn't get sacked. He never got sacked a lot anyways. But really the difference is that you have to make him feel threatened enough to get rid of the ball before he wants to, which then prevents a lot of those pinpoint accuracy fade balls and things that you have down the field. And especially now that they got McMillan back and firing on all cylinders with their three excellent wide receivers, you have to do something that's different. So Texas really was disappointing, having so much preparation with what it came out as the strategy. I think Michigan has a better D-line and probably will be able to affect a little bit more immediate pressure, but it has to structurally learn from some of these other games. Otherwise, they'll continue to put up huge numbers. And that's a very difficult thing because I don't expect that Michigan's going to have a huge offensive production type of a performance, even though J.J. McCarthy played well in the first game and they're capable of stringing some stuff together. So it's a very exciting game for me. I understand. I guess that the line would be around -4, pretty much where it is. Not really a surprise. But if Michigan doesn't figure out how to basically attack Washington and Penix, it's going to be a game where, even though it has a great defense, it gives up more points than people sort of expect.
Yeah, and the crazy thing to me about Penix, so I know like post-game we love to talk about crazy, when something goes really great or really wrong, but he's had almost 1,000 dropbacks in 2 seasons. Chris, you realize he's only been sacked 15 times?
He doesn't get sacked. This is the thing I keep trying to say. And remember, he had the ACL injuries when he was at Indiana. He used to run the ball a lot more.
Right.
He's a pocket-oriented player. That's what he wants to be and prefers to be. That's what he's going to be at the next level. And he's great. The thing about it is his vision is incredible. And he feels and understands when he needs to get rid of the football and how he can deliver the football to not put himself into jeopardy throws and turn the ball over. But the thing is, again, you have to have interior blitzes,
right,
that overwhelm Washington's interior offensive front, because that's the only way that he's going to get rid of the ball earlier than he feels like he wants to, or before the routes development is able to be there. And Washington started running the ball better late in the season, but isn't still a very good rushing attack and not going to probably do that much against Michigan in that regard. So I think you have to kind of sell out and accept that you're going to get man coverage on the perimeter, and they're probably going to hit you for some big plays. But overall, they're not going to be able to string together enough of those to be really successful. If Michigan isn't blitzing much and they're kind of hanging back and they're not playing a lot of really aggressive coverages on the perimeter in man, that's a bad recipe. You look for that early on.
Right. Well, okay. So that was going to be my last one to you about the game, is that with Polk, with Odunze and Polk and even McMillan, like Michigan hasn't faced a receiver core of this all season. Like, I know, yes, they did face Marvin Harrison Jr., and I think he's awesome. But, and you and I have talked about this before, top to bottom, to me, the wide receiver room at Washington was better than anybody's in the country. And I go, and Oregon was right there too, but I just think there's more depth at Washington. But who in the secondary? I mean, and you just put it right there. That's the balance. Like, if you do bring extra, do you trust your secondary to cover an Odunze, to cover a Polk, who's shown they don't need that much space to make phenomenal catches?
Well, you don't really have an option, as I see it, because you're going to get pinpoint accuracy outside the numbers, right? So he's like, there's just ball after ball that's just dropped to the smallest of windows. Even good coverage, it didn't matter. It didn't affect Washington's ability to be potent. Now, you could do another strategy. You could hang back and play a lot of cover 2 man. The problem is that then they're going to take a lot of the underneath dink and dunk stuff on you, throw the ball to their tight ends and their backs, and they're still going to move the ball and be productive. So you have to do a mix of things, but I just really think that you need to quite a lot of really aggressive stuff through the interior gaps. Not so much the perimeter overload type blitzes. I don't think that's going to affect them that much. It's a fascinating matchup. I'm really looking forward to watching this game.
Yeah, I mean, for the first time in a while, I'm very excited about the championship game, because I'll leave you on this one too. Like, it's when I look at Washington and like what they've done, and even after they beat Oregon, then Oregon won the win share. It's like, oh, you don't want to play Oregon, you don't want to play Oregon. They beat Oregon again, but with Michael Penix too, this is what I was going to say. Like, yeah, I mean, the ACL, I mean, he was a running quarterback, but he still slides, and not that he can't protect himself, but he still slides in the pocket beautifully too. And some of those, like I said, those arrow throws, man, I don't see how, and I get the injury comes into it, Chris, and you've broken down players, whether in recruiting and draft, but I don't see how, he could be, not the first quarterback taken. I know Bo Nix will give him a run for his money, but man, like everything you just said, I mean, the accuracy, you can't coach that. Like, you can't coach speed, you can't coach height. You cannot coach a guy that like gets his receivers and gets that. And plus, and Chris, I'll say this to you, I've said it a million times. I know it makes me sick because he's left-handed. It just makes it look easier.
I'm a lefty, so that makes me feel good. But look, I think when you get into ranking quarterback prospects, this is a whole nother conversation.
Right.
When you get into ranking quarterback prospects, so much of that comes down to mental processing and leadership skills and what your value systems are. So a lot of the quarterbacks who have seemed like the best quarterbacks to take over the years, they've had things that were not really physical talent issues that prevented them from being able to be leaders, or when they got paid a lot of money, it changed their work ethic or their habits or their attitudes or whatever. So I'm not the type of person who's going to be out there and saying, oh, I like Penix over Nix or Drake Maine or, any of these guys. I feel like in order to have an opinion about that, you have to do all kinds of testing on who they are as people, and you have to sit down with them and work with them on whiteboards and get them to understand, there's a bunch of things. So he's impressive. I didn't think he was going to be a first rounder, to be honest. And now I think he probably will be a first rounder. And, but I didn't think that Jaden Daniels would have the type of season that he ended up having this season. But I still have reservations about him throwing guys open and operating within a full field reading type of a system at the NFL level. But there's guys that are now showing that development really continues age 24, 25, 26, and they end up, as long as they're determined and focused and hardworking and all these things, they end up making it. So good luck to the NFL scouts and evaluators who have to make these sorts of determinations, because it's fraught, and I think it's going to be a very difficult year for ranking where these quarterbacks should go in the draft. And I would fully expect that it's not going to fall in the order of draft pick who ends up being the best ones.
Right. No, absolutely. And you said it right there. I've heard scouts and evaluators say that throughout the year. Like, when a guy gets his bag, basically, or a player gets their bag, do they still have that same hunger that they had before they got it? And if they change. So, yeah, I mean, that can lead to it. Chris, man, my friend, thank you so much for jumping on. Unfortunately, I won't get to see you tonight. I have to help some family, but I will see you Saturday for Colorado. So hoping they can get the win. I'll be watching, but hoping they get the win tonight. But hey, man, thanks so much for jumping in. I greatly appreciate your knowledge, and I think they should include us in an NIL deal, because we're big deals too.
Yeah, well, let me know when you get that NIL deal, and maybe you can take me out to lunch or something like that, or after the pitchfork lunch, we can get lunch.
Look at that, 100%. That's why he's a mic dropper. Chris, thank you so much, and I will see you Saturday, my friend. Appreciate it.
All right, man. See ya.
That is Chris Karpman, man. Love it. Love talking to him. We always go a little bit of overtime, but you know what? That's because we can. And his insights there. And look, everything he said, Bobby Hurley said, talking about this team, hitting the open shots, how recruiting is going to change. I'll dive into more of that tomorrow. I'll let you digest it again, because we went to a little bit of overtime. But again, thank you so much for checking out Pitchfork Lunch today. I am Michael Caratino at Diablo00 on X, artist formerly known as Twitter. My IG live, you can see it there at michael.caratinudo.5. You can check it out there. And YouTube, guys, subscribe to my YouTube channel. It's at M as in Michael, V as in Victory, C as in Cat 005 at MVC005 on YouTube. Subscribe. You will see, if you miss interviews like that with Chris, again, the knowledge and the understanding, not just of the games, but the program, the players, what the coaches are dealing with. And yeah, I'm not too proud to say it. Maybe you got a few a little more insider connections than I, but nonetheless, it's not about the competition. It's about spreading the Sun Devil, what's going on in Sun Devil country. So subscribe to the YouTube at MVC005 on YouTube. Subscribe. I'm going to get out of here. Everybody have a great rest of your Thirsty Thursday. Check out the Devils tonight. Like I said, I will be watching. Believe me, I always watch. I record, go back and watch. Even when I'm there, I record it, come back and watch, and little more things that I that picked up. And even after hearing the presser, and if I see something in game notes, I take, all that fun stuff. Anyway, I won't bore you with that, but I will see you tomorrow, same bad time, same bad channel. And everybody have a great rest of your Thursday. And yes, it's Sun Devil Nation. As always, forks up.
Terry's three. Johnny Walker matching up against control. His shot. Bruce score. They score. They tie the game up 2-2. Some drives out for Robbie Ryan. Her three right on the money. This is Taya Hansen for three. Other side of the rim with a pretty reverse. Wow. 5 seconds to go. Find Hawk. Hawk spins. It rolls off. And Arizona State wins it. Edwards pulls off. And buries it. Takes this shot.